the question is about the process you follow once you have identified the MOAT companies.
Yeah.
And once you have these companies, do you try to do an analysis as to what this company could be worth or what cash it can bring in 10 years or 15 years to compare between the two companies that have the moats? And now, once you have selected a set of companies that have a good moat, what is the next step? How do you further drill
So it's
down?
it's a good question about just process in general. And I think establishing that mental database, that database of companies that I would like to own this at some price, because the competitive advantages and the compounding potential are things that I think are above average or solid. Typically, I think it's a good idea to sort of at least get a kind of a rough idea, like what I pay, what I want to buy this at a 5% free cash yield, but I want to buy this at an 8% free cash yield because it's not growing very much. Something super rough. And then you just wait. And as it gets closer to that valuation, then you really ramp up the work. Then you do the really hardcore analysis. We put together a discounted cash flow and say, okay, was my initial idea right? But you kind of have to establish some kind of stake in the ground, some initial idea, or you don't know when to really dig deep. And you can't dig deep on everything, even if you do this for a living, which I do.
So a follow-on question just on that.
Yeah.
Now, if we are following that approach, that once you have identified the MOAT companies, then do some kind of analysis and get a rough estimate, then it doesn't really matter. You had two classes of MOAT over there. One, a MOAT that's investing in itself, and one, a MOAT that's just giving the money out.
Yeah. Yep. Good way to segment it.
Then that distinction doesn't matter much if you're doing a follow-on analysis where you're coming up with these numbers.
It only matters in what you would want to pay for it, probably, right? Because a business like a McCormick, for example, you're not going to pay 30 times earnings for this because it's never going to grow at it's never going to compound at a huge pace. A business, whether it's a Google or a company, I'd better put it up there, is Curo, which is doing for-profit secondary education in South Africa, which has a huge dearth of schools, insanely profitable. There you'd pay a lot because there's this massive runway ahead of it. And also I think the thing to bear in mind there is that for the mature business that's probably paying out a lot, you're probably going to make most of your money on the closing of price and value because intrinsic value is only growing at a very steady pace. Whereas for the business that can reinvest in itself, that has that long runway ahead, you're probably going to make more of your money over time on the compounding of intrinsic value. So then a smaller margin of safety makes more sense because you're going to make all this money from it growing and not from that closing of price and value. And also, like if you were to wait for, say, Visa to get to 10 times earnings, you'd just never own it. And that's the opportunity cost I was referring to.